Okay, so let's get right into it. Have you ever been, just scrolling online? Maybe you click on a news clip or a political speech, and then bam, you get blocked. All of a sudden, you're being told you have to prove you're over 18 just to watch it. Yeah, if that's happened to you, you are definitely not alone. It's a really strange, kind of confusing experience, right? And it seems to be happening more and more, especially in the UK. But the reason why it's happening, well, that gets into this massive high stakes story about safety, liberty, and at the end of the day, control.
All right, so first up, let's try to untangle this web of confusion, because honestly, the rules about what gets blocked versus what doesn't can feel, well, totally bizarre and just plain arbitrary.
And let's be super clear here. We're not just talking about the obvious stuff, adult material. We're seeing things like a historian's blog post, a politician's speech, heck, even official court transcripts suddenly get slapped with an age gate. It's this phenomenon of over-removal, and it's happening to democratically important content, leaving pretty much everyone scratching their heads.
So what in the world is causing all this? Well, it all boils down to one single really massive piece of legislation: the Online Safety Act. Now, on the surface, you look at this act and its goal sounds pretty noble, right? To make the UK the safest place in the world to go online. And its main focus is on protecting kids from stuff like pornography or content about self-harm. But you know how it goes. The devil is always in the details. And look, this law didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's actually been evolving for years. There was this huge battle fought over a key phrase: legal but harmful content. The big question was, should that apply to adults too? In the end, free speech groups managed to get that part dropped for adults, but the super strict rules for protecting children, those stayed. And now we're seeing these huge and probably unintended consequences.
And this really brings us to the core of the whole debate. It's this fundamental clash between two really powerful, deeply held values: safety on one side and liberty on the other.
So on one hand, you've got the government's duty, its instinct really, to keep people safe, especially kids. But on the other hand, you have this foundational principle of liberty, a cornerstone of English law, that basically says if something isn't explicitly illegal, you should be allowed to do it. And this Online Safety Act, it's sitting right at the crash site where these two massive ideas collide.
This is where critics like Toby Young come in. He argues that, hey, these side effects might just be politically convenient for the government. The argument is that whether it was on purpose or not, the law becomes a handy tool for shutting down politically tricky topics, like the anti-immigration narrative he mentions, so you don't even have to have the debate. But the people who support the law, well, they frame this whole thing in the absolute starkest terms you can imagine. Take the science minister, Peter Kyle. He basically says that if you want to overturn the Online Safety Act, you're on the side of predators. And when the debate is framed like that, well, it makes finding any kind of middle ground almost impossible.
Okay, so let's shift gears from the theory and the debate to the actual real-world consequences. This is what people often call the chilling effect. And honestly, the numbers here are pretty staggering. Just think back to the title of this explainer. Even before the Online Safety Act is fully implemented, authorities in Britain are already arresting more than 30 people every single day just for what they say online. And they're doing this using laws that were already on the books. So where are these free speech battles actually happening? Well, if you look at the data from the Free Speech Union, it's pretty revealing. A massive chunk, 40% of their cases, are about the debate around sex and gender. I mean, that's one of the most heated public debates right now. It's a really clear sign of how our biggest cultural fights are spilling over and turning into legal ones. And this brings us to a really crucial point. Think about it. Step 1 is the act asks for age checks. Step 2, that forces you to hand over your ID. And what does that do? It effectively kills online anonymity. And that is a huge deal. It's not just about us regular folks. It's a massive threat to people like whistleblowers, political dissidents, and journalists who absolutely depend on being anonymous to do their work safely. And this isn't just an online thing either. The effects are starting to bleed into the real world. There are these growing fears of what some are calling a banter ban. The idea is that related laws could make your boss liable for offensive conversations that are just overheard. We're talking about something that could threaten everything from a chat down at the pub to a stand-up comedy club, all in the name of stopping people from being offended.
Okay, to really get what this all means, we need to zoom out a bit. Because look, this isn't just a British problem. Not at all. This has become a truly global question.
What's happening in the UK is really part of a much bigger trend. You see it all over the world. Democracies everywhere, from Australia to the European Union, they're all struggling with this same problem. How do you regulate the internet? And it seems like a lot of them are landing on the side of more control rather than more open debate.
You know, for a really long time, the go-to philosophy in the West was what's called counter-speech. It was an idea championed by people like U.S. Justice Louis Brandeis. And the thinking was simple. The best way to fight bad speech is with better speech. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? But that whole consensus, it's falling apart. The new way of thinking seems to be shifting towards just suppressing ideas. And historically, that's a tactic that really didn't work out so well for places like the Weimar Republic. So why the big shift? Well, some critics have a pretty pointed theory. They claim this whole impulse to suppress ideas comes from a governing class that has, and I'm quoting here, lost the ability to argue. From that point of view, it's just easier to censor your critics than it is to actually engage with their ideas, especially if you're worried you might be losing the argument.
And all of this leaves us with the central question, really, for every modern society today. Of course, we all want to be safe online. Nobody's arguing with that. But where is that line? Where do you draw the line between protection and outright control? At what point does protecting us from harm turn into controlling what we're allowed to see, what we're allowed to say, and ultimately, what we're even allowed to think?